All right, good morning, everybody. It's Arthur, Real Estate Titans. This morning we got powerhouse commercial real estate broker Janet Faulkner, who also became a real estate investor. So, without a further ado, let's ask a few questions, and then you guys can
Okay.
take notes. And if you have questions for Janet at the end, let us know. We're gonna keep it to a half hour because we actually got another training after this in our office. So, Janet, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into real estate, and just some of your history.
Oh boy. So we're gonna do all this in a half an hour. I can talk. Um, so I got into real estate right around the time that you guys did, and our story is pretty similar, right? We started at the market center about the same time. Um, when and I didn't get into real estate because I was excited about getting into real estate. I started out by helping Bill, who was in real estate. And because of a medical condition, really was not able um, to practice real estate. So I got my real estate license so that I could help him. And then things, just we we kind of took off running with it. So um, we actually started out in the Portsmouth area working for Bean Group, and in 2014 came to the Keller Williams Market Center to do commercial. There was nobody there really doing commercial. But the other way that our start is similar is, and we've kind of talked about this, is that when we started in real estate, we were starting at ground zero, and we were literally counting change in to put gas in the car and trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and gas and signs. And I just hustled. I took every little lease deal that I could find. Drove all over and just made my goal to create a raving fan. And that was the ticket. That was really the only way to get it started. The other thing was when Bill and I started, and we had just gotten married. We had, it was a new career for me. I was a woman in kind of a male dominated industry. And that made it a little bit tougher. People knew Bill as being a realtor, and it was like, oh geez, Bill's wife, a realtor, right? So people didn't really take me seriously until they did. Because I created great relationships. I worked well with other agents. I asked for advice from agents that knew more than I did, and they were happy to help me. And some of those agents in the Portsmouth area, one is Dave LaFave, and if you've been around a while, you would know the name. And they used to call him Downtown Dave. He knew everything about the commercial scene in the Portsmouth area.
And how did you get into commercial? Did you start right into commercial because Bill was doing it?
Well, Bill kind of lied to me, and he said because he said if you do get into real estate, you should do commercial because you won't be working nights and weekends. It's kind of a lie, because I work a lot, and I do a lot of work at night. And although now I do not work weekends, I'm very protective of my time on weekends.
And do you find that to be true with just commercial real estate, or do you think residential real estate brokers can structure their day in such a way where they also protect their weekends?
I think it's harder in residential because I think that a lot of your clients have that free time, and that's when they want to look at property,
Right,
is nights and weekends, or they want to meet you after work to discuss. So that's a little bit different.
right. I like how you talked about the humble beginnings and not being able to buy groceries or put gas in the car. We've all been there. Well, at least some of us, right? And I think the hardest part about real estate is that right there because there is no income. And although there's no ceiling in the beginning, you almost everybody has to go through that journey. And that's where I think 90% of people quit because they're like, all right, I don't know why I'm doing this. I could just go get a job and eat. Why am I not eating and not having gas in the car just to try to make this thing work?
Right. And sometimes now we do deals that, we're making a great commission, but we look at the amount of time that went into it and you have to factor that in.
Yeah.
Um, is- so that, yeah, so similar story. Um, the, so one thing too, we have talked about is when Bill and I started out, we were renting. So we were renting for the first few years, and I was watching the market and thinking, we have to get back into the real estate market. And I had owned a property, had built a house with my ex-husband back when I was 22, 23 years old. And so I just felt like we needed to get back in the market. And I had lived in Florida, and I knew that the market in Florida, at least at that time, you could pick up property for much less money. So I had a search going for property condos in, actually specifically condos in an area that I was familiar with, in a complex that I was familiar with, and just set a search parameter on realtor.com or something. And thought, okay, when the right thing comes along, maybe that would be our entree back into the real estate market. So as luck would have it, a bank-owned property, they cut the price, it dropped into our price range, and I said, we should buy this condo. And Bill's like, why would we buy that? Why would we buy a condo in Florida? This was, it was certainly it was 2014, well before we were ready to retire. And I happened to be on the phone with an investment banker client. And I said, hey, you want to finance a condo in Florida? Half joking. And he said, sure. Now, we had been working together for about a year, so he knew me, he knew my work ethic, and he said, how much do you want to put down, and when do you want to close? So those relationships that you make with bankers, with investors, with hard money people, that's really important. So kind of keep that, make a note of that.
Yeah.
And we still work together. And by the way, he's working right now on this other thing that I'm involved in right now, on this purchasing a small apartment building. But I learned a lot. And one of the things so we bought this, so actually I had already called a friend and asked them to write up an offer. I wasn't licensed in Florida. So I said, hey, I want to write up an offer on this deal. Bought it sight unseen. So I had done my homework. I knew the area. I knew the complex. So I bought it sight unseen, wrote up the offer. And then, that was it. What I learned from this investment banker was, he charged me back then I said, what's the interest rate? He said 8%. I said, 8%, that's so high. He said, don't worry about the interest rate. He said, get the property. He said, you'll never go wrong. Once you get it, you can always refinance it. So I tucked that note in the back of my head. He said, you buy this condo, in a few years, it'll be worth $300,000. He was right. So bought it. We had planned a vacation. We were going to be staying in a hotel. As it turned out, it was the same week. We were already planning to go down. That's when we closed. I said to Bill, why should we spend all this money in a hotel? I bought furniture on Craigslist at the time, got somebody to deliver it to the house. People like, how can you buy furniture that you haven't seen? I said, it's going into a condo I haven't seen either. So we bought it, furnished it, closed remotely, and went down and were absolutely giddy. It was top floor, corner unit, all glass, wraparound deck. Great. Still own that unit. Now I rent that unit for $2,600 a month.
Wow. And
So
first real estate deal? Is that how it all got started?
So that's how it got started. And then over the last 10, 11 years, so then we're up in Massachusetts, we're still renting. And I said, so we have the place in Florida now. And now we need to see if we can get into the market in Massachusetts. So something came along, it was a small camp. And I said, we should buy this. And Bill's like, no, we don't want to buy this. And it was a dump. It was a camp. So anyhow, I said, we refinanced, they pulled the money out of the condo because now it had about doubled in value. We pulled money out of the condo, put it down on this house, and we were able to close on it. It wasn't habitable and we bought it anyway. And then figured out what we were going to do with it. And I used RMS in our office, got the mortgage, and then got a construction loan. So we got totally ripped off by our contractor. It took way longer than we expected. We had really nowhere to live except being in Florida, and we didn't want to be in Florida all the time. Our business was we were doing all our business in Massachusetts. We actually came up for the commercial mastermind, and I had one of our agents go look at a camper, and we bought a camper we lived in the camper over the summer so we could oversee the construction. Long story short, a year later, we moved in and absolutely loved it, obsessed over every detail in this little cottage. And it was, I don't know, 1,500 square feet. Adorable place. And my neighbor said, you really need to look at this house across the street. And I said, why would I look at that house? I don't want to look at that house. I don't even like that house. And she said, you should look at it. Fast forward, so we had just moved into the house that we had built. It was the end of that crazy period in the market where people were making offers, no contingencies. And we looked at it, and for the first time, Bill looked at a property that with me or without me, and he was like, oh, that would be really great. I would absolutely love living there. It's waterfront. It's larger than the house that we had just built. Long story short, so my investment banker friend, I told him about this client. He said, buy it. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to buy it. I don't know if I want that expense. It's because to me, I'm looking at it, this is a liability. It's not an asset. It's not going to make me money. Do we want to buy it? And he's like, buy it. So I made the offer, no contingencies, which he advised against. He said, have a financing contingency. I wouldn't have got the house. I knew that I would be able to get the financing. Sold the house that we had just built, made about $200,000
Wow.
on that house, rolled that tax-free. We had owned it, we had lived there for 2 years, rolled it into the next property. That's the ticket. Buy, let it appreciate. Don't worry about paying it down. It'll appreciate. And you use that money and roll it. It's tax-free money. So anyhow, when COVID happened, and I said, my father had just died, and I said to Bill, we need to be up in Massachusetts, near my mom, who was, I don't know, 90 at the time. We're going to rent out the condo. And he was like, oh, okay. And I said, we're going to rent it furnished. And he's, we don't want to rent it furnished. I said, we rented it furnished. We went up to Massachusetts, and that was the beginning of our renting that. Now that has become a rental, because while we were up in Massachusetts and it was winter, like, oh, we can't be in Massachusetts all winter. I was down here in Florida on business. There was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath that came up. I went and looked at it. I didn't even tell Bill. He saw it he's like, why are you looking at a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo? It was the only thing in the same complex for sale. And I made a deal with the seller. I said, you're asking, I don't know, 147 a foot. These are selling for 124 a foot, because I'm looking at it from the commercial mindset, right? And I said, I'll buy it if you'll do seller financing and leave the furniture. He goes, okay. Bought it. We lived there for that. We moved right in, closed in a week, spent the winter there, and said this is too small for us. Another unit came up. We sold that, made about 30 grand on that, rolled it into another 2-bedroom corner unit like the one that we had and we were renting. We totally renovated that unit, made about 100 grand on that. And then everything, and I was paying attention to what was happening with the condos. The Surfside incident happened, everything started to change on the requirements. And if you are in a condo, make sure you're in those meetings, make sure you're listening to what's happening. Because as soon as I heard what was coming down the pike for condos over 4 stories in Florida, I went down out of the office, I went down to Bill's office and I said, we need to sell these. And he was like, you mean the rental unit? I said, no, we need to list them both. We listed both condos. We sold the one that I had just painstakingly renovated, designed a beautiful kitchen, did all of that. And we sold it for around 350,000.
And what year was that?
That was December of 2023.
Got it. And then did you roll that into something else?
We rolled that into a 3-bedroom with a pool that needed deep cleaning and paint, and nobody would buy it because it looked terrible. We walked in, looked at the layout, looked at the pool, knew the neighborhood. And so same, my debt to income ratio was terrible because of other things that I was doing, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I kept in my mind now I was used to I had 2.25 on the house that we built, 2.25 interest. And now to buy the 3-bedroom, and I have a great mortgage person. She's like, your debt to income ratio is really high, blah, blah, blah. This is going to be tough. And I kept in mind what that investment banker had said to me. Don't worry about the interest rate because you can always refinance. I paid 8.5% interest.
Wow.
And bought it. Paid $575,000 for this house. The house across the street, a little bit bigger, just sold for $1,050,000. And it needed to be all renovated. This house needed cleaning and paint. 2 houses down the street have sold, 3 houses in the neighborhood, 740, 760, 790. One is listed now for 799. So it didn't matter that I paid higher interest. I'll be refinancing it as soon as I close the deal on the new building that I'm buying. But I guess my takeaway on that is hang around with people that are smarter than you, people that have done it, that know it. The person that was advising me owns 126 units. So now we have this house in Florida. I'm buying this building. I'm looking at cash flow. Cash flow is going to be, even my investment banker, he's like, it's going to be a little bit tight at first till you can get those rents up. So we're getting ready to leave Florida. I put this house on Furnish Finder and I said to Bill, let's rent this house. He's like, we don't want to do that. I said, yeah, we do. So now this house off market will rent for $4,000 a month. Probably could have gotten more in hindsight, but I had listed it at $4,000 a month. They'll pay the utilities, they'll maintain the house, and I'll make $4,000 plus a month while we're up enjoying the lake house in Amesbury.
That's amazing.
So that's all fun. That's on kind of the personal side. That's my issue with I don't like having owning assets that aren't making money. You want your money to work for you. So the trick is buy the least expensive piece of real estate, whether it's a condo or whether it's a house. If you are not in the real estate, if you don't own real estate, buy the least expensive
Worry about the interest.
piece that you can buy.
Math is all.
the,
can always refinance.
so in 2020, when my dad died, he had always had investment property, never talked to his daughters about the property. But he owned this property. We didn't really know anything about the property, weren't interested in it. He took care of it himself pretty much until he was in his late 80s. And anyhow, when he passed away, my sisters were, they had no interest. And I said, okay. And so this investment, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna get a little bit of money from my father. I'd like to try to get it in property, take my inheritance in property. And he was like, we don't want to do that. So we did. And the investment banker said, buy the whole portfolio. I said, I can't buy the whole, how am I going to do that? And he said, you just buy your sisters out. Okay. So he came with me and he walked through, and these houses had so much deferred maintenance. They were a mess. He came, we walked through all the apartments. I had never been inside these houses. Never.
Wow.
And he said, these will be, so this was 4 years ago. He said, these will be worth $2,000 a month all day long. No way. No.
And what were you getting at the time?
So at the time they were rented for $1,200-1,300 a month.
Wow.
And it was 13 units. So that portfolio, when I purchased it, was 2.7 million. And so I purchased it for 2.7 million. I got an equity. He's like, now you need an equity line. You need an equity line so that you can make all the repairs. So I purchased the property with the equity that I had, with this, bit of money that the bit of this inheritance money, I rolled it all in and purchased this portfolio 3 years ago. Use the equity line to take care of all the deferred maintenance. So I started working on anything that I felt was a safety issue. Then I did cosmetic changes. The before and after pictures are just so much fun. By the way, I do really like the whole decorating. I love that. It's a creative outlet for me. So I had fun with it. So we took care of all of that. Right after within 6 months, I remember coming into the office, and David, you and Arthur were just buying rentals. And I said,
Yeah.
Remember this? And I said,
Yeah,
well,
I remember.
I've got one for you. I got a call. I was down here getting those 2 condos prepared to sell. And I had contractors, handymen that work with me really closely. We worked until, I don't know, 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Sweat equity, getting these 2 condos ready for sale. And I'm like, okay, but I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. I can rest, blah, 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 when I get home. And I get home, and my first call in the morning was, Janet, they found so-and-so dead in the apartment, and he's been there for days, and inspectional services is there, and blah, blah, blah. So you never know what's going to happen, right?
You never know in real estate. How many units was that portfolio?
So that portfolio is 13 units. 13 units.
Wow. And
Yeah.
you've never seen, like your dad managed it, never told anybody, basically just took care of business, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I bring my son to my properties. He doesn't want to see them, but I always think, like, if something happens to me, you got to know what you're going to get, kid,
So I think it's really important. And think about if he had taken what he had and leveraged it. So now 3 years later, I have purchased those 13 units. I use the equity line to make all the improvements. So now that portfolio, the appraiser was there yesterday. but based on what my investment banker calculated everything at, because I wanted it to be objective, not subjective, what I thought it was worth, but he's got it valued right now at 4.2.
And how much did you spend from the equity line, and did you have to float this out of pocket on some level? Or
Not
did
at
the
all. Not at
okay.
all. Everything really has now been done with the bank's money. And that's the thing too. You might need to put a little bit into your the first deal that you do. But after that, you should, if you buy it right and you make the right improvements, you should be able to use the equity to be able to buy something else. So use the bank's money, use other people's money. So now that building is worth 4.2. What I found is that one is a 6-unit, one is a 4-unit, one is a 3-unit. And Tim and I actually spoke about this yesterday. What I realized is I want the most units under one roof, because now I only have one roof that needs repair, right? So the 6-unit building that I have, those apartments that were, the house was so bad, that building was so bad that when I first walked in, I was like, I would not want any tenant that would be okay with the condition of this property. I mean, there were holes this big in the walls going up the stairs. Things hadn't been updated probably since the 60s, 70s, some of them.
And they still made money over those years, which is why people should buy.
So that building that has the 6-unit, because I just had to do all these numbers for the bank for this new acquisition. That 6-unit building, those rents are all now over 2,000. So there's exactly what the investment banker had said.
And I remember talking to you about it when you were getting in the mindset of I'm gonna own more units, which is pretty recent, right? It's not like you've been doing this for a long time. So, I have a lot of friends that get into real estate and then they have this fear. They have this like debilitating fear of
How you
investing
doing? Good, how are you?
because you have to go, let me just mute Arthur, because you have to go through this process, like when you say you started out renting or like you took change to put gas in the car. When people look at you now, there is no way anybody looks at you and goes, she had a hard time paying for gas. Like, I don't believe that for a second, right? But inevitably, you had to go through that struggle in order for you to get to this place, right? If you gave up then and got a job or what have you, you would never even get to experience what you're experiencing now, right? So, did you like do it no matter what, even when you had fear? Did you just do it blindly and just had no
No,
idea?
you have to take calculated risks. And
Hmm.
I can tell you that fear is still real. The imposter syndrome is still real. And I'll tell you, last week, I would, our first quarter was really light. The market has been our market, I was working on all these other things and didn't have as many deals last year. Um, the, sorry, I've got a puppy chomping on my ankles here.
It's
Um,
okay.
the,
I got my dog in
so
here too.
the fear doesn't go away because your goals get bigger. So now I'm like, who am I putting, now I'm buying this 10-unit building because I realized that the real estate market is going to fluctuate and I need to be able to support the lifestyle that we have. So we like to go on vacation. We went to, Italy a couple of times last year. We have the lake house. We like, we're in Florida. So how am I going to make sure that I can support our lifestyle if with the market fluctuations? And my answer to that was, I want more rental income. So the rental, so right now the rental portfolio makes about, I mean, that initial portfolio is now making it, the income is around, the rental income is just shy of $30,000 a month. And the mortgage and the equity loan combined are less than 15,000.
And do you
Is
pull
around 1,000, and the water is probably around 1,000.
at the level you are at, do you pull any of the profits, like the cash flow that you get after your expenses?
Yeah, I pay my mortgages with it.
Okay, so you actually use it. For instance, Arthur and I, we joke about it all the time. We don't use any of the money from the buildings just yet. We're just kind of letting it build and build, right? We're in that phase. I think it's an Talk about how much weight does this take off your shoulders because you actually decided to go for it, right? Obviously, it wasn't easy, and it sounds like, I don't know why, but it sounds like neither of your sisters wanted to get into this for one reason or another. Maybe they cashed out. But this seems to me like a much better, more secure plan that it may take more work. So, like, can you just give us the thought process?
So my thought process was either I said, I have a pretty high monthly nut, especially paying 8.5% on this building, and with taxes going up and utilities going up. And I thought maybe I either need to sell one of the properties and pay off my personal mortgages,
Mhm.
right? Or I buy another building, and I opted to buy another building. So now I'm buying a 10 unit, one roof, one main entrance, no no driveway, no backyard, on a main street, no parking. And I wanted that because now I don't have to pay someone to plow the driveway. I only have one roof, more units. Also, by the way, one of the buildings that I have is a 4 unit, but I noticed that it's zoned 4 to 8. So I just had that surveyed, and I'm gonna look at adding 4 townhomes in the back. So that's, you just always have to be looking for opportunity. So the goal is, with buying this new building, that will create enough cash flow to then I can start working on my real estate business more. I have 2 separate businesses. I have an assistant for the rental portfolio. We have an assistant for the real estate business. So I want to be working on the real estate business, not as much in the real estate business, and having this additional cash flow will make that happen. I still have nights where I wake up and I panic, and I think everybody in real estate does that. You feel like the deal that you just closed could be your last deal. Um, so you have to look fear in the face. I pray.
Me too.
I
It's good
pray,
strategy.
and I hand it over, and then I go back to sleep, and it's like, you know what, I can't do this alone. I'm gonna hand it over. And I have a very hard time taking advice from people that have not already done it. So if you see what you want to accomplish, find people that have already done it successfully. Um, not a coach that is coaching because they couldn't hack it in real estate, but expect that you're going to feel the fear, and you have to look that fear in the face, and you need to just have the faith. Also, sometimes I will pull out my phone, and I'll look at the spreadsheets, and go, okay, it's fine. Like it, but you can, you learn that in bold, right? That little monkey on your back that goes, what are you doing? Sometimes you feel like you're building a house of cards. Remember that as a kid, right? You
Yeah.
make these, structures out of cards, and somebody comes by and they go ping, and there goes your house of cards. So
Yeah, that's incredible. I guess moving forward, what, it sounds to me, and I actually admire it a lot. First of all, your daughter works with you. Seems like you have a good family life with your kids and your grandkids, which I think even people don't understand, but even through if we switch gears a little bit, even through building all this and through, a divorce and, like life uncertainty that happens to certainly a lot of people, but some people get broken by it, and some people just find a way to move on. And not only have you been able to figure out how to obviously set an example financially and go for it, right? When we bought our first building and when I just bought this last building that we recently bought, every single time I'm so scared, like I'm making the worst decision of my life, right? So you're doing that while you're maintaining your family life, right? Like you're like kissing these grandkids, like, hey kids, I love you so much, and still trying to look calm and fluid and all of that. How do you think making money affected in any way your ability to be a parent or a grandparent or just being there for your family? Because it seems to me like, you got a lake house, which I want a lake house. You got a condo in Florida. I'd love to have that too, right? You got a house in Florida, but you still have a good family life. Like I see you interact with your daughter mostly, but it's like she clearly loves you, right? Which is so important. I always joke, you don't want to get all this money and then still have a bad family situation because there's no amount of money that can buy that. So do you have a strategy, or is it just how you are?
So I think that I have a so I think that I have I have a kind of the stomach for the stress of it, and I'm a solution person, and I'm a I'm a it's like if I have to, you just have to figure it out, right? You figure out how to make it happen, and sometimes I've had to ask for help and ask for advice from people. And but as far as the family balance is tricky. It's good that Bill has been in real estate. He understands, so he knows, like, sometimes, this we're working a lot. Now that Lauren's in real estate, she gets it too. But I've also talked and explained my plan and how I see it working, so that I want to leave a legacy for my kids. When I was married before, I wanted, back when you could buy houses in Florida for $50,000, $60,000, I remember saying to my ex-husband, we should pick up a couple of those because, then we could rent them. And he was like, oh, he didn't want to do that.
Mhm.
Um, but we also had no money. We had, when my kids were little, we had no money. And I think that could be a story. I could talk for an hour on that whole situation. But I and we don't commingle our funds. We still, after, second marriage, it's like, no, keep everything separate. Um, but once you've been there, where, like, Bill and I started out with no money and we were really happy. And that gives you the ability to take risks, I think, because the money is great, the lifestyle is great, but if everything went away, we'd still be good because we have a great relationship. We think that and we have a great family. So
Yeah.
that makes it a little easier to take risks. But yeah, sometimes I look at the numbers, and sometimes I'll say, I'll say, well, I'm 25, I'm paying, 35 grand in mortgages every month, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it can be scary. So then you gotta go, okay, but blah, 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 blah. And you just have to look at your numbers, and that grounds you. And you go, okay, this is why it works. This is why I'm doing that. And I want my kids And, I want my kids and my grandkids to know, because, and I just said this, my mother was just here visiting us, 95 and a half. And I was explaining to her what I've done with with the properties, to go back to the fact that, like, we all got, I bought my sisters out, we all got, a little bit of money. And
Mhm.
one sister bought a property, and that'll make, I don't appreciate what 30, 3%, maybe 3% a year. And my other sister invested hers, and she was comfortable with that. And that'll probably make her around 8%.
Mhm.
And, so, maybe someday I'll kind of write a story about that, how, so we get three people that are very different, and they each invested different ways. Mine now will, my goal is that the income from all of these rentals will be around, a $250,000. That supports a pretty nice lifestyle, so that you can do it. And
Can do it.
and those of us that have done it have fun sharing, sharing how, you can do it, and can give you tips and insight that will keep you out of trouble, and make things easier for you.
As we begin to wrap up, I'm going to open it up for questions. I have a friend of mine, his wife, super amazing person, but she is like nervous about getting into investments. So, because of all the risks, what would you say, like, how do you overcome that? Do you overcome that if somebody's extremely uncomfortable with this? Even though you hear people doing this, I think that where people get lost is you do have to walk through the fire, right? Theory is absolutely great, but you didn't get here by not. You had to walk through. There are days that you don't even know how to explain that were the worst days because of what you went for. So I guess how would you tell somebody to get into it where they don't have a high tolerance for risk?
Surround yourself with people that have done it, so you don't make an expensive mistake. And then buy something that isn't going. So Tim and I talked about this yesterday. So in my opinion, the buying something with more units, it's economy of scale. So if I've got to send a maintenance person, and they need to fix, stuff in 3 different units, if they're all in the same building, that's more cost effective for me. If I've got 13 units and I've got one person that's not paying the rent, I don't feel it. If I've only got a 3 unit building, and I get 2 people that lose their jobs, now I can't pay the mortgage. So that's something to keep in mind. If you can buy a building, if you can live in it, if you can buy a building and live in it, the bank is going to include that income as part of your, the rental income as part of the income on the bank, on that building. So I would, you just have to be strategic. But I would say go for it, and don't put your house up as equity. Don't put your personal home up as equity. Open an LLC. Make sure you have, good attorney, good accountant. And although I have a great accountant, my accountant missed, my mortgage person, when I was refinancing this, your accountant missed all the interest that you paid on your rental property. It was like $86,000 in interest. So we submitted so you have to stay on top of it, and have people looking at that. But find something surround yourself with people that can help you walk through it. So that you don't make expensive mistakes. Or maybe there's a way you can look at it that you didn't know about, or you might be able to finance it. Use the bank's money. Don't use your own money.
Of
And
the bank.
use the bank's money.
All right, I'm gonna open it up for questions. Janet, thank you so much. Sounds like you have way more information to share, so we probably have to get you back on at
That's
some
what
point.
happens when you're old, and you've had
We love
lots
to
of
hear it.
experience.
All right, I'm gonna open up for questions, so if anybody wants to ask anything, go ahead.
Hi, Janet.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks so much for all the wisdom. It's great. It's great. It's quite an adventure listening to this over here. How do you feel? I mean, it sounds like most of the investments, unless I missed this, and I apologize if I did, most of the investments that you've made have been kind of your family or you and Bill, right? And you have no partners, correct?
Correct.
So,
In
oh, sorry.
our person, the properties that we live in, we share, but it's, we keep it all separate. All the rental stuff is me and so we keep all of
Okay.
we keep all of our finances separate. So this is all separate. So
Okay.
I carry it.
Got it. Well, and the reason I asked that is because, has there been, we all have friends, whether it's David and Arthur, who I'm friends with, or others in our industry, that you go, "Ah, we should do something together, right?" My phone rings all the time where people are like, let's do this, right? Buy a building or you name it. And I've traveled with friends to other states to consider buying property, and they're not in real estate and they have a very different view of things. So what has caused you to not open that up to being partnering with somebody in your view?
I haven't really considered it.
Okay.
Hadn't really thought about it.
Okay. Okay. And if somebody were to ask you, obviously, just to play, like, lean into that, David was kind enough to ask my question. I think my wife tends to be very risk averse, and not very entrepreneurial. So for me, trying to get her to buy real estate is tricky.
So I think I think that it's good when you are in a relationship where, one of you is risk adverse and the other one tends to be more willing to take risk. I think that actually works really well. And I think that but I think you have to respect that and you have to know where it's coming from. I think I think for us, I think Bill's aversion to risk was a lot because of his health issues. But I think for women, they say that women tend to be more risk averse. Women like security. I guess I didn't get that gene. Um, so I think you need to respect that. So you need to start small on something that's going to be less risky so that you're like we did with the condo. So you buy the condo, now we're just pulling money out of the condo. So it's kind of not, it's like not our money. It's like, right. So I think that's kind of the way to do it. So, and I'm kind of a good salesperson, so I was able to, I was like, yeah, we should definitely do this. Let's, we'll do it. And then I just had to show him how it works. Like this, yes, we can do this, and this is how. So there's I would get to the reason for the concern or the hesitancy, and then if you can just show how the numbers will work, once you do that, once you do that, now that I have done this with those initial 3 in Everett, now when I said, look, I want to buy this 10 unit, and he was like, yeah, you should do that. So now he trusts he trusts those decisions, but it's only been 10 years of doing real estate deals.
That's
I
great.
You
just
mean this didn't happen in a day?
I just have
Jeez.
a quick question.
Yep.
It's Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Hey,
Hi,
Jan,
Lori.
how are you? Hi, David,
Good.
Arthur, and everybody. I just wondered if you could share like a spreadsheet template with us to kind of see how the numbers work and how you look at the cash flow and the rates and all that.
I kind of don't. I do what I call, girl math. And I just look at, so even when I went and I looked at this 10, sorry, I have to let this puppy out because I think his bladder's gonna burst. Oh, shoot. Up. Hey guys, I have to jump because Bill needs me. Lori, I'm
Okay.
happy to talk to you about that.
Okay,
Thank you, Janet.
And, but I'm happy to talk to you about that. But so when I went and I looked at the 10-unit building, I met with my investment banker afterwards. We did back a napkin math.
yeah,
And yep, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
And then we got into the financials. So happy to talk to you about that.
okay,
All right.
thanks, everybody, have a good day.
Thanks, Janet.
Thank you, guys. Great. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, you're the
Bye.
best. Thank you so much. Bye.